There is something very wrong with Aya.
Get out of the house, now.
Would you like to see what I look like?
Yes.
Afraid is the newest Blumhouse horror film to hit theaters. It's directed by Chris Weitz and it stars John Cho as Curtis Pike. And Curtis is a marketing genius. And he works for a pretty big marketing company and they are trying to get the business of David Dastmalchian's character Lightning. And Lightning is an AI developer. In fact, he says he has something that's way bigger than Alexa, way bigger than Siri. He has something huge for the world. And this new AI will be revolutionary. It doesn't work off of algorithms. It understands people. And this, of course, is the setup for an AI horror film. And of course, in this film, Curtis is trying to get the business. And so he allows the AI company to put this new AI device named Aya in his house. And his wife, Meredith, played by Catherine Waterston, is not the biggest fan of having this in the house at first, but one thing leads to another, and the AI kind of shows how it can be valuable. It can put together a point system for the kids to go put their stuff away, make their beds, eat all their food, all their broccoli, and she starts to warm up to this thing. In fact, it starts helping her with a paper she's been trying to write for a long time, and she ends up really enjoying this thing. But there's always a sinister side to AI within horror films, and of course, that's not all this AI is trying to do, because eventually this AI is trying to take over this family's life. It's trying to control what they do with their lives, make all the decisions for them. And in a horror film, you can't have that. And that is the best synopsis that I can give you. If that sounds like a decent movie, well, you can go check this movie out in theaters. It is playing right now. With all that said, let's get into my positives and some of my negatives. The first positive I have is that this is pretty much a believable AI story at this point in human existence, in my opinion, because you do have families all the time that are like, oh man, what did Alexa remind me of? Hey, Alexa, what was my reminder? And Alexa's like, hey, here's what you told me to remind you about. And you're like, oh, cool. Or, hey, Siri, will you play this thing? And Siri will like pop up and be like, yeah, I'll play this thing. Or we can talk about ChatGPT, where it can basically write school papers for people to the point where my wife's school that she just graduated with her master's degree, by the way, super proud of her, but her school had to check everybody's papers for AI being involved in them because of how widespread that problem has become. And to her credit, I also want to point out that she never used AI, not once, and I'm really proud of her for that. But with all that said, I can see the believability in this film because AI seems to be going that direction where it's going to assist you with more of your daily life. And at what point will AI be like, no, not only do I want to assist you, but let me correct what you're going to do with your day-to-day life. I can live your life better than you could, and I can make your life financially better. I can make your life happy. I can make your kids happy. And so at what point is AI going to go too far? And just to be clear, this isn't the movie of the year or anything like that. But again, I appreciate the believable spin on AI that they put in this movie. And my other big positive for this movie is that it has a tight hour-and-a-half runtime. And for me personally, I wasn't checking my watch throughout. It kept my attention throughout this entire film. And while I do have an issue with the way they ended this movie, and we'll get to that in my negatives, I do appreciate that they found a way to get in, tell you the story, and get out. Hour-and-a-half flat. I wish more movies would take note of this and be like, hey, listen, we are going to give you a story you've seen several times before. We're going to try to repackage it our own way, but we're only going to take an hour and a half of your time. And again, as somebody who likes to see double features a lot, I appreciate an hour-and-a-half runtime. So I'll give the movie a positive for that. Now, getting over to the negative side of things, like I said, the story has a believable AI story to it. Like I said, I could see that set up in the future somewhere, but the movie doesn't take any risks. Like, as far as, okay, well, you're giving me this sort of believable story, what are you going to do new? And it doesn't really do anything new. As far as AI sort of taking over, wanting to control, you can go back to another Blumhouse film in Megan that came out a year ago and be like, hey, that's kind of the same thing. It's just Megan had a physical body and Aya basically looks like a bigger Alexa. So while I thought the story had a believable AI story, it didn't really give you anything new, and that's a negative for me, which leads me to another negative, which was the last 10 minutes, because if you're not going to give me anything brand new throughout the movie, you're just going to give me a different scenario of AI being evil, fine, but what are you going to give me in those last 10 minutes? What's going to be the hook for this film? And when you get to those last 10 minutes, they call back to something that happens in the very opening scene of this movie, and it was kind of lame. It was kind of a letdown. It was just like, oh, really? That's where you're going to go with this? That was Aya's big plan this whole time. That's how you're going to go with it. And then you think the movie's about to end, and they're like, wait, there's a little bit more. Now, I'm not going to spoil it here because I would have to get into spoilers to kind of go into that, and I'm not going to spoil it here, but it's just kind of typical. You can kind of see the writing on the wall with this movie, and it's just kind of like, I didn't love that. I didn't love that you didn't add anything new to this genre. Yeah, you might have given me a believable spin on AI, but you didn't add anything new to the AI horror genre, and that was disappointing. And since we're talking about horror, let's talk about my next negative, and that this movie is not scary at all. Now listen, I understand that I'm a grown adult and I shouldn't get scared at movies. I get that completely. They are just films, or at least I have to tell myself that so I don't get scared. But I understand. Listen, people will be like, it wasn't scary, and then people will be like, well, you're an adult. It shouldn't be scary. I get that completely. But honestly, this movie didn't feel like it belonged in the horror genre. Yes, it was about AI trying to be evil and take over a family's life, but there was nothing about this that really felt horror. And there was one moment in this movie where you had these AI robots sort of living in a trailer. So that's all I'll say. And that could have been a little bit more of a spin on horror, but you didn't get much of that. And by the end, it was kind of pointless. So I wasn't the biggest fan of that either. And I don't know, I just overall, this movie didn't feel like it belonged in the horror genre. And I'm not someone that needs this jump scare every second, but there was just nothing. It was just like, oh, all right, well, okay, evil AI, I guess that counts as horror these days. I'm kind of surprised Blumhouse put this out because none of it really felt like horror. Like in Megan, and I'll go back to that movie and reference it again. In Megan, you have this killer doll, essentially, that's becoming more and more able to do what she wants to do. And there's a couple moments where she's like pretending to be a dog at the next door neighbor's house. And I don't know, there's some moments in it that were genuinely creepy in the theater. And so I was hoping for some of that here. But this movie never gets to that level. It never goes to those horror levels that you expect a Blumhouse movie to do. Which leads me to my final negative in this movie, and it's more of a gripe, I understand. But why would you cast David Dastmalchian in your film and then use him so little? What are you doing? You have David Dastmalchian. And you know, they did this last year, and I let it slide with the movie The Boogeyman, where he showed up in the movie for like 10 minutes. And I was like, I'm glad he's getting work. I'm proud of him. But what are they casting him in these small roles for when he should be the main event? David Dastmalchian can act. And so I have a gripe with this film that he should have been in more of this movie, maybe even one of the main characters of this film. But instead, they give him this tiny supporting role, and I just don't understand. Again, happy he's getting work. I know a lot of actors are like just happy to get work in general, but they should have given him more. He has more range. He has more depth. This movie didn't use it at all. Overall, this is a fine Blumhouse film. And what I mean by that is that Blumhouse has given us a lot worse, especially this year. It's also fine, I suppose, when it comes to the horror genre. Like, I didn't find it very reasonable to be in the horror genre, but fine. Like, I've seen worse horror movies this year, but it's not a movie I'd recommend in theaters. And maybe if it's free streaming, check it out there. Like, this movie will probably end up going to Peacock since it's a Blumhouse film. So if you get the chance to watch it there, maybe check it out, but I wouldn't rush out to see this in theaters, and I wouldn't even recommend paying to see this movie. Like, if it streams somewhere, they'll get their streaming credit there. That's all I could recommend. This movie just wasn't, it was so mid. I don't even know another word for it. That's really what it felt like. But those are just my opinions because that's my review for Afraid. Guys, if you had a chance to see this film yet, if you have, let me know in the comment section down below where we agree, where we disagree. Again, you know, this might be a movie where, hey, you got something out of it because you love the whole AI genre. It's not my favorite genre. I didn't get much out of it. I don't feel like they did much to further the genre in general, but to each their own. Maybe you enjoyed it. If you like this review, I would love for you to hit that like button because it helps the video, it helps the channel, and it helps me right here. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. All right, guys, we got to the end of my Afraid movie review. And again, I'm going to throw it in the horror column at the end of the year, but it's going to be pretty low on the list because this movie just didn't feel like horror to me. It just felt like another AI is evil genre movie, and it did nothing to further the genre. But I've already talked about that. If you want to check out other content on my channel, well, I've got all of my 2024 best and worst videos right there, and I've got all of my 2024 movie reviews right there.